Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of Checks and Balances TV. Today's program is entitled 2011, a year of many financial ups and downs. So let's see how today's news may impact your financial future. The end of the year is usually a time for reflection on what happened over the previous 12 months. But in 2011, some of the top financial news stories have been on what did not happen. One of the biggest stories was the U.S. long-term credit rating downgrade from AAA to AA+ by Standard & Poor's on August the 5th. The downgrades sent the stock market in a tailspin, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average suffering its sixth biggest single-day decline ever of 635 points. The S&P downgrade was a result of the federal government's inability to make a decision on how to cut the federal deficit. The debt ceiling was raised by Congress 3 days before the S&P downgrade was issued. The failure of the Congressional Supercommittee to trim at least $1.2 trillion out of our budget over the next 10 years has made 2011 the year of inaction. Okay, so what's really going on here? Let's check the facts using our checks and balances process. The major economic news events over the past year can be traced back to April 18th, which is the day the S&P warned of a potential U.S. credit rating downgrade. Congress passed a 2011 federal budget on April 15th, but because it did not include enough budget cuts, S&P reacted quickly by assigning a negative outlook to our country's credit rating. When the federal government reached the debt ceiling of $14.3 trillion on May 16th, the S&P stood ready to take action if the federal government did not find a way to cut at least $4 trillion from the deficit over the next 10 years. On August 2nd, the debt ceiling was increased again to $14.7 trillion through the passage of the Budget Control Act of 2011. Yet Congress continued to waffle on what to cut from our budget. One of the provisions of the Budget Act was the creation of a Congressional Supercommittee tasked with cutting just $1.2 trillion from the deficit over the next 10 years. The Supercommittee went to work in August and had a deadline of November 23rd to agree upon a federal deficit reduction plan, or else automatic spending cuts would be triggered. But even though Congress was now focused on the problem, the actual downgrade by S&P caused a severe market decline in August and September. The Dow Jones Industrial Average experienced the worst decline for August in the last 10 years, while the S&P 500 suffered a third-quarter loss of 14%. The failure of the Supercommittee seemed to define the year of inaction and mark the delay of any real policy changes from taking place until at least 2013. Okay, so now that we've checked the facts, let's balance this news using our checks and balances process to determine what action you should take today. When the Supercommittee failed to fulfill their assignment, they essentially handed off the responsibility of slashing our country's deficit back to Congress and possibly a new president in November of 2012. The automatic spending cuts totaling $1.2 trillion will not become effective until 2013, which means Congress has another full year to argue against them or figure out an alternative solution. As it stands now, these cuts must be divided equally between defense and select domestic programs. Leaders of the U.S. Armed Forces have already fought against these measures, expressing deep concerns over cutting our military budget and strategic presence around the globe, as well as compromising our national security. Unfortunately, it's not just domestic problems that are hurting the U.S. economy. The European sovereign debt crisis also came to a head in 2011 and may have been the biggest financial story worldwide. Greece, Italy, Portugal, and Spain are each facing default on government debt. During Thanksgiving week, the U.S. stock market's fall was blamed on Europe and Belgium's credit rating downgrade from AA by S&P and growing concerns that the debt crisis would continue to spread worldwide. While Europe's financial struggles impacted our markets here at home, they also serve as a warning of what the U.S. may experience in its own future. The federal debt deficit hit $15 trillion on November 15th, and the new debt ceiling of $15.2 trillion is expected to be reached next month. If our congressmen and women, as well as the president, aren't careful, the U.S. could experience another S&P credit rating downgrade in 2012. Okay, so what's the bottom line here? While the year of inaction is nearly over, we may very well be talking about the years of inaction at the end of 2012. The indecision of our elected officials to change the financial course of our country this year shows a total lack of true leadership. But there is a silver lining to this year's indecision by Congress that helped some Americans in 2011. The failure of the Super Committee fared well for retirees who had feared cuts to Social Security and Medicare. Some Americans also found ways to make the most of a bad situation by cashing in on timely investment opportunities such as gold. Mortgage rates also fell below 4% for the first time in 30 years and made it very tempting for many to buy a home. Yes, 2011 was an interesting year, but it also furthered the U.S. on a financial path it cannot sustain. While the forecast for 2012 looks like more of the same, take advantage of the good while you can, but also brace yourself for more rough financial waters ahead. And now for Matt's weekly financial tip, tool, or technique. Even though it's the end of the year, there's still time to minimize what you will owe in taxes this year. So here are 3 common expenses often overlooked as tax deductions. If any of these apply to you, locate your receipts and claim these valuable tax deductions, exemptions, or credits to save as much money as possible on your tax return this year. Number 1 is your home. If you sold your home in 2011, there are deductible selling expenses and closing costs that you can claim. These include the real estate broker's commissions, title insurance, legal and inspection fees, advertising, and administrative costs. If you're a homeowner, don't forget about the property taxes you paid this year. These are all fully deductible. Number 2 is health care. If you're self-employed in 2011, you may be able to deduct the health insurance premiums you paid. Your insurance plan needs to be established under your business to qualify, and the deduction can't be more than your earned income this year. Also, long-term care insurance premiums can also be deducted, up to a certain amount depending on your age. For example, those 71 and older can claim long-term care premiums up to $4,240 as medical expenses in 2011. And number 3 is professional fees. These fees might be the most overlooked deductions of all, because many people don't consider them when filing their taxes. Income tax preparation fees, IRS audits, investment advisory fees, appraisal fees on items given to a charitable organization, and casualty losses are all deductible. They can qualify as miscellaneous itemized deductions if they collectively total more than 2% of your adjusted gross income, or AGI. Before this year comes to a close, take some time to review your finances and see if you can reduce your taxes from any of these commonly overlooked tax deductions. You might just find a few you missed, which may brighten your financial picture for 2012. Be sure to log on to our website and download our featured report, The Truth About Taxes, a free report that reveals how to legally reduce or eliminate some of the taxes you may be paying. And finally, remember that only you can control your financial future. You can succeed. You just need confidence and determination. I'm Matthew J. Reddick from Checks and Balances TV. Until next week, dump debt, invest wisely, believe in yourself, and make it happen.